أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 51 and 52. قل لن يصيبنا إلا ما كتب الله لنا هو مولانا وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. قل هل تربصون بنا إلا إحدى الحسنيين ونحن نتربص بكم أن يصيبكم الله بعذاب من عنده أو بأيدينا فتربصوا إنا معكم متربصون. Say nothing will befall us except what Allah has ordained for us. He is our master, and in Allah let all the faithful put their trust. Say, do you await anything to befall us except one of the two excellences? But we await that Allah shall visit on you a punishment from Him or by our hands. So wait, we too are waiting along with you. We were discussing this issue of musibah coming to people by the will of God or by what they do. We discussed that in some verses we have that whatever musibah and calamity comes to you, it's due to what your hands obtain, achieve. And in other verses, like here, we have قُلْ لَنْ يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا. Nothing will befall us except what Allah has written for us. Now this sort of contradiction was seen in one very particular verse, which the kuffar would say whatever wrong, Allah quotes from them that whatever wrong befalls us is due to you, and whatever good comes to us is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah says, say everything is from God. And then again the verse continues that we discussed it last week, continued that say whatever good comes to you, say all of them are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then it says whatever good comes to you is from Allah, whatever evil comes to you is from your own self. Now how we discussed this, but there remained one very particular verse in Surah Hadid which was a bit difficult and needed some more explanation. And that verse is ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها. Whatever musibah, whatever calamity comes to you is written in a book before we bring it into existence. And this is easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If this is the case, then what type of factor is whatever we do in bringing about a musibah? If everything is already written in a book, ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها. It is all written in a book before we bring it about. So if this is the case, what is the result of what we do? It seems that it has no effect. Now I want to mention one very interesting instance of bringing these different verses to prove a point by two very different personalities. If you remember in the event of Karbala, when Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was taken to the palace of Yazid, Yazid asked him, what do you think, how do you think Allah dealt with you? Did you see what Allah did to you because of what you tried to do? And Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam recited that verse in Surah Hadid, ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها. Whatever musibah comes to you, it is already in a book before we bring it about. And Yazid told his son Khalid to respond to Imam Zain al-Abidin. And of course he couldn't, he didn't know anything about Quran, but Yazid was aware of the Quran himself. So he said, no, this is not the case. ما أصاب من مصيبة فبما كسبت أيديكم. Whatever musibah comes to you is for what you have done. You see, these two verses could be actually used by opposing parties to prove one's own case. Whatever musibah comes to you, you could just put it in this way, that okay, this is the will of Allah, Allah wanted it to happen, and I could do nothing about it because of the verse in Surah Hadid. Now someone else can come and tell you, no, this is not the case, whatever musibah comes to you is because of what you have done, and because of Surah Shura. So how do we put these two opposing verses together? Now, the clue is here in Surah At Tawba, in this verse that we are dealing. Well, if you remember in the previous verse, it said, "En tusibka hasanatun tasu'hum." If some good should befall you, it upsets them. وَإِن tusibka musibatun yaqulu qad akhadna amrana min qabl. And if an adversity befalls you, they say, we had already taken our precautions in advance, and they go rejoicing. قُلْ لَنْ يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا. Say, no adversity will befall us except what Allah has ordained for us. In fact, it says the same thing as in Surah Hadid, that whatever musibah comes to you is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already written it. It is something already predestined for you. And the clue is here. Huwa Mawlana. He is our master. Huwa al-Mawla, of course, means someone who looks after the affair of someone else, who looks after someone's prosperity, looks after someone's growth, someone's development. This is Mawla. Now, the verse, the context of Surah Hadid as well is talking about mu'minun, that you should not worry if any calamity or adversity befalls you, because this is already ordained or written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the point is that we can look at a musibah from two angles. Once a musibah is really a musibah, is an adversity, because it comes to us as a result, as a punishment of what we have done, or as a justice to what we have done. If you remember, we said there is a system of justice working in this world, underneath all our actions, and usually every action has a just reaction to it. So you could look at calamities like this, or you could look at calamities in a different way. We have two different types of calamities, or if you wish, we have two different types of calamities. One calamities are those which come as a reaction to whatever we have done, as a type of result, outcome of our actions, because of that system of justice. So, ما أصاب من مصيبة فبما كسبت وما أصابكم من مصيبة فبما كسبت أيديكم. The other type of adversity is what is written for us because we are meant to grow through that calamity, through that musibah. It is a tribulation to enhance our position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whatever calamity comes to us, it is either due to our evil actions or due to something already written, so that we could be tested, or, well, maybe test is not a very good term to be used, we could be put through a process of growth. And if we are mu'min, if we are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, usually these musibat, these tribulations are written in a way that Allah would gradually take us through a process of growth from easier to harder so that we could achieve our spiritual enhancement. However, for kuffar, of course, the situation is different. The tribulations could not be that test. The tribulations come as an outcome of what they have done. And, of course, there is one issue here. The tribulations in one's own life are already written for their spiritual growth. For every person it is written that this person should go, as it's like rizq. If the rizq is written for you, you will receive it anyhow, except if, of course, you do something which would cut off that rizq. But regardless whether you are kafir or mu'min, regardless whether you are Muslim or non-Muslim, some rizq is written for you, that you would have it. Some lifespan is written for you, that you will have it. This is a rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all His creatures, because He is Rahman. For exactly in the same way as a rizq is written for us, tribulations are written for us as well, before we come to this world. And those tribulations are written in accordance to our personality, and they are a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take us through some hardships so that we are given our spiritual growth. So they are already written completely. Of course, this is different from what our hands would achieve in this world and would bring tribulations to us. That's a different issue. But this is a type of tribulation already written for everyone. So, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن نَّبْرَأَهَا. These are all written before you come to this world and before we bring it about. So you shouldn't worry if a tribulation comes to you. And this is for both mu'min and kafir. However, these tribulations, since kuffar do not have any spiritual growth whatsoever, they would become like a punishment for them. They will become something which just brings loss and terror over them, just brings loss and uncomfort over them. But for mu'minun, it's just taking them higher and higher, and it's just being killed in a war. An example which is given here. A mu'min and a kafir, both of them, they go to war, they fight against each other, they both are killed in a war. This is written for them already. However, for a mu'min, this, of course, is a tribulation. This is difficult for himself, for the family, and everyone around them. But for a mu'min, this would become a great success, an achievement. For the kafir, this would become a great loss, being killed in a battle, losing life, and losing the whole hope for prosperity, for felicity. So we have two types of tribulations, and this is why these verses come against each other. This is why Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam can say, "Ma asab wa ma asabakum min musibatin fil ardi wa la fi anfusikum illa fi kitabin min qabl an nabraha." And Yazid could respond, "Wa ma asabakum min musibatin fa bima kasabat aydikum," because these are talking about two different issues. Here in this verse, Allah says, whatever comes to you as musibah, those who are with the Prophet, peace be on him, of course, it comes to you as a mercy. It comes to you as something which is a means for your growth and development. Why? Because Allah has written it for you, and Allah is for your Mawla. He is like a very kind mentor, a very kind tutor or teacher or whatever, more than a teacher, a very kind master. I think Mawla is a term which is very difficult to to translate into English or into any other language, and that's why if you want to translate in any other language, it would take many, several meanings. He is the one who holds, who has all your affairs in his hand. And therefore, what a worry if he is your Mawla, whatever comes to you, and everything comes from him, so what a worry. Why should we worry? So the mu'minun are told, the Prophet is told, to tell to these munafiqun that say nothing will befall us except what Allah has ordained for us. قُلْ لَنْ يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ مَوْلَانَا. If he is our Mawla, then of course there is no worry. Now, isn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Mawla for every human being? Because he has created us, isn't it? So he is the master, he is the one who holds everything in his hand for every individual. That's true, but Allah himself says that although I create you, I sustain you, whatever, but sometimes I just leave the affairs of you to yourself. I don't take charge of them. It means that I leave it to the system of justice in this world, to other systems which I have set forth. You are now at mercy of different rules that I have created in this world. I'm not going to bring you out of all these. Although everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, this is like the question of qada and qadar. It's very difficult to analyze. Everything is in hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, still you have free will. Everything is in his hand, still he says, I leave you to yourself. So there are two different aspects. In Surah Shura, now again, you see, whenever we come to this aspect, we have contradictions. We have contradictory verses. Whether it's about free will or predestination, whether it's about this musibah, whether it's about wilaya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is your Mawla. Now, in Surah Shura, we have أَمِ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ. Have they assumed, taken awliya apart from Him? Someone who can look after their affairs. فَاللَّهُ هُوَ الْوَلِيُّ. The only wali in this world is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no other wali, no one else that could look after anything. He is the only wali. وَهُوَ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And He gives life to the dead, and He is able over everything. However, in Ayatul Kursi, what we have, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah is the wali of the believers. Here it says, فَاللَّهُ هُوَ الْوَلِي. The only wali in this world is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Ayatul Kursi it says, Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah is only the master, the guardian of those who believe. يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. And more explicitly, in Surah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, we have ذَلِكَ. It says that the kuffar, they would have no one to look after them. They should go away from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The mu'minun, Allah would سَيَهْدِيهِمْ وَيُصْلُهُ بَالَهُمْ, would guide them, would make their affairs to come into peace and to tranquility. He says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ مَوْلَى الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. This is because Allah is the Mawla for the believers. وَأَنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ لَا مَوْلَى لَهُمْ. And kuffar have no Mawla. They have no one to look after their affairs. Of course, as if Allah wants to ridicule, if Allah wants to somehow derogate the kuffar, he says, your Mawla is the shaitan. He is looking after your affairs. Not that he looks after your affairs, but that he is actually trying to take you to punishment. So it is as if he is your Mawla. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمْ الطَّاغُوتُ. Those who are the kuffar, those who have disbelieved, their awliya are taghut, shaitan, shayateen. يُخْرِجُونَهُم مِّنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. They take them out of light to darkness. What type of wali is this? Taking someone out of good and prosperity into evil. So this is not a mawla, this is a ridicule, that there is no mawla. So there is no contradiction when we say وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتُ, and when we say وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَأَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَا مَوْلَى لَهُمْ. They have no mawla at all. Because that's not mawla, that's just ridiculously mentioned that they are as if they are your mawla. So mawla is someone who, whatever he brings to you, whether good or something that you see to be a calamity, an adversity, a musibah. It looks like to be a musibah, but it's not a musibah. It's something that Allah has written for you to take you through the higher positions. It's just like the examinations for children. It's a musibah, isn't it? They have to go through a hard psychological pressure and to leave all their play and everything and study is really hardship. But everyone knows that this hardship is good, and the parents who are the most kind people to their children, they force them, they even scold them, they even sometimes deprive them of some pleasure because they have to go and have those tests and have those examinations. That's a calamity. Every one of us have been children and know what type of calamity is going through all those hardships of the examination. But when you look at it as a grown-up, it's not a calamity, it's not an adversity. Now, whatever a mu'min is put into in this world, although it looks to be calamity, Allah says it is not. It is something written already for you, and you go through all these hardships to bring you up. Of course, it's written for kuffar as well, as a rizq, but for kuffar it would turn into real calamity, because Allah is not looking after their affairs anymore. So it would become something which just bring them hardship over hardship. It reminds me of one other hadith. One of the companions of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Fudayl ibn Yasar, he visited the Imam alayhi salam while he was given poison, and he had become so thin that Fudayl ibn Yasar says, when I went to meet Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, what was left of him was only his head. Well, that's an exaggeration in literature. That it means that he was just bone. And as soon as I saw him, I started to cry. Then Imam told me, Ya Fudayl, why are you crying? I said, because of the situation that I see. He said, Fudayl, this is what Allah has written for me. And whatever Allah does to a moment is good for the moment. And then he says, Ya Fudayl, if a mu'min wakes up in the morning and sees that the whole wealth of this world is given to him, that's good for him. If a mu'min wakes up in the morning and he is being taken to be mutilated and torn into thousands of pieces, it's good for him. Because Allah does nothing to a mu'min except that it's good for him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَفْعَلُ بِالْمُؤْمِنِ إِلَّا مَنْ هُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. Whether give him good, give him bad, or say bad in our eyes, of course. Calamity, prosperity, whatever comes to a moment, it's good. Why? Because he is the Mawla. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. He is the master of the believers. So he's not going to leave them. He's going to take them through all these trainings and developments. So here the answer is the same thing. Because in the previous verse it says, if adversity befalls you, they say we have taken our precaution. If good comes to you, they say that, they go unhappy, they say why we went with them. Now here it says, say nothing will befall us except what Allah has ordained for us, whether good or evil. He is our master, huwa maulana. And if this is the case, if this is the situation that Allah is the Mawla, wa ala Allahi falyatawakkal al-mu'minun. So in Allah let all the faithful put their trust. Because if He is the Mawla, and if whatever He writes for you, He has already written for you, is good for you, is for your growth and for your development, then why not trust in Him and just leave things to Him and welcome whatever comes to us? Now, then there is a more detailed explanation in the next verse. قُلْ هَلْ تَرَبَّصُونَ بِنَا إِلَّا إِحْدَى الْحُسْنَيَيْنِ. Do you await anything to befall us except one of the two good things? They, of course, were expecting, because they had gone to war, if they were killed, they would have become happy. If they came back with booties of war, they would have become unhappy and say, well, we hope that we had gone with them as well to bring some booties back. Now, here it says, whether we are killed or come back with booties of war is both good for us. It's the same thing as Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said to Fudayl ibn Yasar. It's both good for us. Do you await anything to befall us except one of the two excellences? إِحْدَى الْحُسْنَيَيْنِ. Meaning, either we get martyred and we get the degrees of the martyrs in Jannah if you are killed in the war, or we come back with the booties of war. And both of them are good for us. There's nothing that we can lose. What it means that a mu'min never loses in this world. A mu'min never is in calamity in this world. It's all good that comes to a mu'min. وَنَحْنُ, however, what we expect for you, because we are kafir, of course, what we expect for you, وَنَحْنُ نَتَرَبَّصُ بِكُمْ أَن يُصِيبَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابٍ مِّنْ عِنْدِهِ. And we expect from you that Allah shall visit on you a punishment from Him because you are wrongdoers, and وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ. It's all because what you have done. Allah would come back to you with punishment. This is what we expect that Allah will do with you. Or, what else? As we might get killed in the war and we become martyrs, you might get killed in the war as well, and you go to hell. So, بِعَذَابٍ مِّنْ عِنْدِهِ أَوْ بِأَيْدِينَا, or by our hands. If we kill you in the war, it's punishment that Allah will bring to you by our hands. If we are killed in the war, it's prosperity come to us by your hands, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَتَرَبَّسُوا, so wait. إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ مُتَرَبِّسُونَ, we too are waiting along with you, meaning that you are waiting for all these things to come to us, and we are waiting for all those things to come to you. And let's see who is the truthful, who is in mistake. And certainly, of course, after death, people would see all these things, all these truths of the matter. So just to sum up, we have calamities already written for everyone. That's a rizq. You cannot escape it. And if you are mu'min, you have to welcome them, because this is something which is written for your growth. Whatever comes to you is just إحدى الحسنيين, one of the two good things. You lose something, you have gained. You find something, you have gained. It's all for your growth. However, there is another system going on, which is system of justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bringing punishment back to people as calamities, which of course is something which is not very welcomed. This of course would not come back to a mu'min. Whatever calamity comes to a mu'min is something already written for them, and it is something for their growth. And they shouldn't worry if they lose something or if they find something. And this is what Imam Zainul Abidin actually recited in front of Yazid. وَمَا عَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن نَّبْرَأَهَا. It's already written for you. إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. And the verse, of course, explains لَكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ, so that you should not worry, you should not go sad for whatever you miss or you lose. وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ, and would not become overjoyous, very happy for whatever you gain, because these are things for your growth. It's not for making you sad or for making you happy. Of course, naturally, mu'minun will become sad or happy, but Allah would tell them, do not go excessive in sadness and in happiness, because this is something already written for you. It's not for your pleasure or for your hardship. It's just for your growth. And of course, the other verses which speaks to the kuffar, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ, is because what you have done. So, as I said, when you come to qada and qadar, predestination, free will or predestination, when you come to the issue of walaya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you come to the issues of musibah, you are always in this contradiction, because we usually look from one perspective, not from two perspectives. And this is why it puts us into difficulty of understanding. وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِهِ الطَّاهِرِينَ.
Assalamu alaikum. Sheikh, you were mentioning about Allah taking charge of the affairs of the mu'mineen. In one of your previous lectures, you were saying that Allah says, who will allow their reins of their lives to be taken by Him? And it's very few people who will be even willing to allow that to happen, because we're very scared of that, because we don't understand. And you were saying that even if we do, Allah may not accept it. So certainly we're not kafir, and certainly most of us, and I speak for myself, are not of that caliber of what we need. So where are we? In which situation do we find ourselves?
Now, very good question. This walaya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has different degrees. And you might put yourself in hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with different strengths or with different emphasis. So a believer certainly is being paid attention by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether the level of faith is low or is high, the faith is strong or weak. The stronger the faith goes, the more a person's affairs is being looked after by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it comes to a point where a person completely submits everything to him and resigns back, and everything is then decided by him, as we have in Dua Arafah of Imam Hussein, Ilahi aghnini bi ikhtiyarika an ikhtiyari. Make me in a way that whatever you choose would suffice for me, and I don't have to choose anything. Now, this doesn't mean that, for example, the Imam, after coming to this station, wouldn't come across different options and shouldn't choose different things. But it means that he leaves it to him what is good, to choose for him what is good. And whatever option he makes, he just does it according to his own understanding and says, okay, whatever outcome is there is good for me. It's Allah who's deciding for me actually what is good and what is bad. And although I do it, I'll do it with my own decision, since I'm relying on Him and I'm putting everything in His hand. So He would take me, whether I take this option or that option, He would take me through the process which leads me towards that final destination of myself. Yes, of course, the more the faith grows, the more one submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more he will become willing to take charge. And this depends on the degree of the faith.
Sisters. Sorry?
Thank you. I just wanted a little bit of clarification. You know, you said that there were two ways that the calamity befalls someone. One is written before, and that's for their growth. And the other one is because of what they've done. Now, if a calamity happens because of something that you've done, but that itself causes growth, which one of the two, which one of the two is it? Was it a decreed one before? Was it one that you've done yourself? Or even though you've done it yourself, it causes growth? And then, is this maybe one thing that Amir al-Mu'mineen means when he said, who is there to turn my evil deeds into good ones? In Dua Kumail, he said.
Yeah. Well, don't make things very complicated. These are issues which we understand not very clearly. Now, of course, it is possible that we have done something, a calamity befalls us, and then we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. And then that calamity would change nature into something which would put us into a process of growth. However, usually the case is that if we have done something wrong and that calamity comes to us, the only thing is that Allah might take away the effect of those calamities or might make up for them. Or it just comes and takes and gives us some loss or something and go. However, turning that into something which is a means of our growth, that means real tawbah and sincerity in that, which of course is very difficult to have.
Sisters? So the Shaykh, just now that you explained, is that anything to do with the fixed calamity and variable calamities, where variable calamity, the fixed are the fixed in whatever circumstances, but variable can actually, Allah can take away the variability of it depending on certain of our amal or action.
Even those fixed calamities written already, they are variable, they could be changed, because Allah's hands are open. We don't understand it again. It's difficult for us to understand this issue of everything written before and then it could be changed by dua and by action or whatever. Still, this is something which is difficult for our level of mind to understand. However, yes, the calamities could be changed, could be averted, could be avoided. But I just wanted to warn something, and that is, it is not to us to judge whether a calamity is something already written or due to people's action. It is very difficult. It's not at our level of comprehension of things. It's only for those who have some access to local mahfuz and other issues like A'imma and Prophets. For us, we never can judge whether a calamity comes through a reaction of an evil act or through something already written. So this is very important to bear in mind.
Sisters?
Just one question presently. When a child is born with certain disease, what factor determines? Is it Allah's will, or is it, if it's predestined, and what factor comes into account when the child, which is is there no sin has been done for him? Why he's been born with certain disease?
Well, this might be, since we live in a type of collective life in a society, whatever we do would have some effect on our children, and whatever our children do would have some effect on us. So sometimes it is possible that due to the actions or decisions or whatever parents or grandparents or grandparents do, something would come to children, grandchildren, grandchildren. It is possible. However, of course, whatever comes to them, no one is actually taken into account for actions of others. On the day of judgment, of course, they are created like that due to some circumstances, due to some decisions taken by other people. But they are going to be taken into account according to what they are given. And this is the meaning of La yukallifullahu nafsan illa ma ataha. Allah would never burden someone with a responsibility more than what He has given them. It's just like, for example, if someone without any decision or without any action, without any evil of some other people is created just like that, without, so for example, eyes. And this is how Allah wanted him to be created. And this is probably better for such a person in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I said, these are very, very complicated issues. Can you say a person coming with an eye into this world and making sin with that eye, with those eyes, and bringing great calamities to himself on the Day of Judgment, is better off than a person who comes to this world blind and wouldn't acquire all those sins? I mean, it's only on the Day of Judgment, when things become clear, that we can decide whether it was good for that person to come to this world blind or with eyes. Is it good that Allah gives life to some people, or it's bad? We have in the Quran that on the Day of Judgment the kuffar says, وَيَقُولُ الْكَافِرُ يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ تُرَابًا. They say, if I was just not turned from soil to human being, if I was just that soil. So it seems that it's not good for them. Now, is it good that Allah creates them or not creates them? These are things which are very difficult for us to assess, because we have only we have access to a very small part of the big picture. When the big picture appears, then everything would fall into its place.
Assalamu alaikum. Sheikh, quite a few times you mentioned these things we cannot understand or we cannot grasp and things. And I just wonder, because most contemporary Islamic dawah revolves around the issue of, well, look, there is no mysteries in Islam. God is knowable. We can know about Him and we can understand about Him. I mean, most Salafi dawah leaflets and things contain a very clear picture of who the God that they worship is, by following a literalism in regarding the hadith and the Quran and the attributes. But then we seem to, by involving so much or rationale into understanding what these things are, that we are at a loss. And I mean, I wonder, is then God just a big mystery ring, or is there something that I can certainly declare that this is what I know and this is a sure thing?
Yeah, at one level, of course, it's very simple. God is the creator. He has told us that everyone is responsible for their actions and everything is in His hand, and then we are going to be judged according to the actions, whether hell or paradise is our destiny. This is very simple. But when you come to analyze them deeper, of course, then there is difficulty. What is this argument between Ash'arites and Mu'tazilis taking for, or Shiites taking for several centuries? Why they are arguing? On what issue? Certainly there are things, I mean, if you go deeper into knowledge, if any of these, which people you mentioned? The Salaf. If anyone can explain the type of disparity between these two verses, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن نَّبْرَأَهَا, and the verse in Surah Shura, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُم. If they can explain this, well, very well, that is very simple. But it is difficult. It's like just the issue of qada and qadar, which Amirul Mu'minin said, is a very deep ocean. Do not delve in it because you might get drowned.
Why does Allah then give us an information that ultimately it's blah blah blah? It's something that we cannot use really, because He's telling me about something that I cannot understand. It's like telling me a riddle just to make me waste my life thinking about the riddle with no answer. A riddle that at the end has no answer that I can attain to.
No, there is answer, of course. As I said, we have to analyze them and come to a type of understanding which takes both of them on the board. The point is, the quarrel going on through the history is because some people took some verses, gave them more emphasis, and ignored others, and vice versa. However, if we try to take both of them on board, then we come to a deeper understanding. And when I say deeper understanding, it means that we come to our shortcomings of understanding as well. This is very important. I mean, to know what you do not know And to know what you cannot know is a knowledge in itself, isn't it?
I will have two more questions. One from the ladies.
Surely the supplication and dua would get a place in the tribulation of every individual, because the relationship between a slave and Allah is the prayer. Couldn't that come, and then that's the only answer, could we?
In what sense, sorry?
The sense that anybody has got a difficulty, that here says Allah has written down for you, and the supplication, which is in Arabic dua, could change the destiny. I have read somewhere that the dua will go up and will fight with the destiny and take over. And that is the supplication being taking a place in our life.
Yes, this is a very good point. Actually, it skipped my mind to mention this. In many verses of the Quran, it's mentioned that calamities come to you so that you turn to God and call Him. And this is very important. I mean, usually we go away from God. He just gives us a shock so that we go back to Him.
Ud'uni astajib lakum. Ud'uni astajib lakum.
Yeah, ud'uni astajib lakum. And now, in other verses we have, for example, وَلَوْلَا إِذْ جَاءَكُمْ بَأْسُنَا تَضَرَّعُوا. Why, when the calamity, our ba'as came to them, they did not came back to me with supplication and crying, calling upon me. And in another verse it says that when we send our messenger, we send lots of calamities, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَرَّعُونَ, so that they come back and call me, beseech me, because then that would soften the heart. This is one of the major philosophies behind the existence of all calamities that come into one's life.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheikh. Inshallah, we meet next Sunday.
Inshallah.
Wa alaikum assalam.